Parshas Vayeira, Tavshin Pei Aleph. And as we all know, when we discuss Avraham Avinu, when we discuss the Midah which actually defined Avraham Avinu, we know that Midah is the Midah of Chesed. And in this week's Parsha, we really elaborate on and really describe so much of the special Chesed that Avraham Avinu did. First of all, we see at the beginning of the Parsha, we have the Midah of Hachnosas Orchim, welcoming in guests. And Avraham Avinu lifts up his gaze. He's sitting outside his tent. He lifts up his gaze, the Torah tells us, and he sees three people standing there. And Chazal tell us that these people resembled a common Arab. They were not people that were necessarily upstanding, visiting dignitaries. They weren't any of those. And despite that, the Torah tells us, Vayar, that Avraham Avinu saw them, Vayoratz likrosam mipesach ha'oil. Avraham Avinu saw these people. He saw three guests. He saw three people coming. And Avraham Avinu ran toward the guest. And then we look at the zrizas with which Avraham Avinu did this mitzvah. Besides running toward the guest, the Torah tells us, Vayimaher, that Avraham Avinu rushed a number of times. Vayimaher means that Avraham Avinu didn't just walk, he ran. He ran to greet the guest. He ran to do this mitzvah of Hachnosas Orchim. He ran to do things for the guest. Avraham Avinu also, he ran to tell Sarah about these great guests, this great opportunity which is here now. Imagine people coming, Hachnosas Orchim. Avraham Avinu runs and he tells Sarah, look what an opportunity we have over here. We have to serve our guest a meal. And then Avraham Avinu himself ran to prepare the delicious meat for the guest. And all of this, mind you, remember that all of this was taking place while Avraham Avinu was a chaylet. Avraham Avinu had just had a bris milah. Avraham Avinu was a chaylet, and still he did hachnosas orchim in this incredible, incredible fashion. And Avraham Avinu, the Torah tells us that while he was doing this mitzvah of Hachnosas Orchim, Avraham Avinu even asked the Shechina to please hold off. Avraham Avinu was in the middle of talking to the Shechina. Imagine, picture this in your mind. Avraham Avinu wanted to tend to his guest, and he asked the Shechina, do me a favor, please hold off a little bit. Please wait while I tend to my guest. And Chazal tell us that we see from here, from this Maisa of Avraham Avinu, telling the Shechina to just hold on. I need to do the mitzvah of Achnosas Orchim. Chazal tell us, Gedoyla Achnosas Orchim Yoiser Mikabolas Pnei HaShechina. Achnosas Orchim is even greater than being Mekabel Pnei HaShechina. So now when we talk to the people here in Bikur Cholim that open up this beautiful house every day of the week, but certainly on Shabbos, you're doing God's work. You're doing something which is more chashuv, yoiser, mikabolas pnei hashchina. Just imagine the tremendous chus. And as we move through the parsha, though, we talk a little bit more about the chesed of Avraham Avinu. But we see a level of chesed which is really beyond. Look what happened with Avraham Avinu by Sodom. That kind of chesed was just incredible. Because I want everybody just think for a second what Sodom was all about. The city of Sodom was the absolute antithesis to every single thing that Avraham Avinu stood for. Right? We all know, you know from your young days in school and all the stories that your teachers told you what went on in Sodom, whether it was with the houses or the beds or the chairs, all these incredible things at the Midrashim about what they did in Sodom. But suffice it to say, Avraham Avinu, after the times of Noach, right, Avraham Avinu began the Olam HaTikun, to fix up the world, to rectify the world. Avraham Avinu began it with the Midas HaChesed. Avraham Avinu told us that the world revolves and must begin with Chesed. On the other hand, Sodom v'Amoira were the pushback on this. Sodom and Amoira were places of absolute cruelty. Not that it was in the middle, not that it was less Chesed, it was the absolute antithesis, the opposite of everything that Avraham Avinu wanted to teach and everything that Avraham Avinu stood for. And Chazal described the tremendous levels of cruelty that went on in Sodom. I mean, for number one, they did not let guests in. Avraham Avinu, we just talked about in the beginning of the parsha, Avraham Avinu, his whole life was about greeting guests, bringing people into his home. And in Sodom, if you were a guest, they stopped you. Maybe they had those treads, reverse treads, if you go over it with your tires, you puncture your tires, you couldn't get into the city of Sodom. It was totally blocked off. No guest allowed. Could there be something more in contrast to Avraham Avinu? So really, just imagine, think for a second, really, when Avraham Avinu heard what was going to happen to the city of Sodom, Avraham Avinu should have been pretty happy with the demise of Sodom. Imagine the Malachim tell Avraham Avinu that, Sodom is going to be destroyed, and Avraham Avinu in his mind could be thinking, boy, that's a pretty neat thing for the world. I mean, they're fighting me every step of the way. As we know, everything that a person does influences the overall and general atmosphere in the world. So Avraham Avinu is pumping good deeds. He's pumping chesed into the world. And the people of the city of Sodom are pumping all this ra, all this bad, everything into the world, going against Avraham Avinu. And now they tell Avraham Avinu, Sodom is going to be destroyed. If you're asking me, Avraham Avinu should have been quite happy. They were bad, and that we would now be rid of them. We would be ma'avir ruach tumah min haaretz, that the Sodom would be good riddance. They would be gone. But Avraham Avinu was above that. Avraham Avinu was different. Not only was Avraham Avinu not happy about what would happen to the city and the people of Sodom, but listen, Avraham Avinu, he went and he davened for them. Avraham Avinu begged Hashem, if you have 50, 45, 40, he went all the way down till 10. If you're going to find maybe 10 righteous people, would you destroy an entire city? If you have some righteous people there, Avraham Avinu went and tried to litigate and tried to find a schus for the people of Sodom, and he basically begged for their salvation. So try to imagine and put all of this into context and into practice. Avraham Avinu was above all the personal things when it comes to chesed. And that really is a lesson that we can all learn and try to work on. To look at the way Avraham Avinu did chesed. How many times is a person presented with an opportunity to do a chesed, and right away, as soon as we're presented with an opportunity to do chesed, all the personal cheshbonos get started in our minds. We start to think, does this person agree with all my shitas of Yiddishkeit? Maybe if not, then maybe he doesn't deserve that I should go out on a limb, that I should go out and do chesed for them. Are we from the same group? Are we from the same type of group? That this person, maybe this person even does things that I personally am against. So how could I why would I do a chesed for that person? So Nesivos Shalom tells us that we need to study and appreciate this type of chesed, this chesed of Avraham Avinu, that we need to be focused when we do chesed on one thing and one thing only. And you know what that thing is? That one thing you need to focus on is chesed. That's it. Do something for another person. That's what chesed is. Not to start sizing them up. How good has this person been to me? Do I like the way they lead their lives? And look at Avraham Avinu. They were doing everything against Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu was focused. He knew what chesed does to the world. He knew what chesed means to Hashem. And just like what chesed means to the world in general, every person, as we mentioned many times, Nesivos Shalom tells us, every person is really an entire small world. It's what we call the Olam HaPrati. There's a world that's a world for everybody, and then there's an individual world. Each person, not that you go around advertising it or pushing it, but every person has to know in their mind that they are the center of their own small universe. You're not supposed to act that way and make believe that no one else exists. But there's an Olam HaPrati where those that are in satellite around you are being influenced by you. And those that are in your family and your friends, and by your extended family and your extended friends, there's a ripple effect that from your Olam HaPrati, there are cosmic, you set off and you give off vibes that can have repercussions for miles and miles around the world and for generations to come too, just from your Olam HaPrati, your individual world. And the personal, individual, these personal things, your individual things, begin with the Olam HaTikun, just like Avraham Avinu, and that is the Midas HaChesed. And someone who wants to be misakein their life, just as Avraham Avinu wanted to be misakein the world, if you want, the Nesivos Shalom tells us, if you want to be misakein your life, you need to learn to love people. You need to learn to do chesed and ahava. And that's what the Nesivos Shalom tells us, that it's a tremendous tikkun for yourself, for every person, to love every Jew. No questions asked. They don't have to be like you. You don't have to know them. They don't have to do the same things you do. The first reaction, your instinct has to be, as we love every person. And not just the ones who agree with you, not just the ones who look like you, and not just the ones who speak like you. You need to know that you're focused. Chesed means that it's one thing only, doing chesed, helping out for another person. And from there, the Nesivos Shalom tells us, you start with helping a person, you step up from there, from Ava and Chesed, from making that a part of you, then you grow. Then you step up to Avas HaTorah. And from Avas HaTorah, you step up to Avas Hashem. But it all starts with this midah of Ava for your fellow Jew, of Ava for a fellow person. The Pasuk tells us, Olam Chesed Yiboneh. The world is built on Chesed. What does it mean it's built on Chesed? That you could pile everything else on top, but if you don't have the foundation, if you don't have a good foundation underneath, then everything comes piling down. Olam Chesed Yiboneh, the world is built on top upon Chesed. Chastecha Hashem Mala Haaretz. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling you that the midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the whole world, the midah of the world, is a midah of Chesed. And really, the entire Bria, by extension, and the Olam HaPrati, that all stands on Chesed and Ava. But what type of Chesed? The Chesed that we learned from Avraham Avinu in this week's Parsha. He was ready to go out on a limb, try to save people who were not only not like him, but they were against him. And this is a tremendous lesson and a tremendous thing that we can all look to and study and try to make it part of our lives. Just to train ourselves that our instinct is, we love every person. We want to do without judging them. The lesson of Avraham Avinu about Chesed.